So we will be doing some readings from both Exodus and Luke next week's or the week after's readings, technically, but close enough. So I have it's not even a favorite verse necessarily, but a phrase that I absolutely love in Ephesians 4:1 says, "Live a life worthy of the calling you have received." And I just sort of think about that a lot and wonder, am I actually living a life worthy of the calling of God? And in Colossians 1:9 and 10, it says, "We're asking that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will in all wisdom and spiritual understanding, so that you may walk worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to him, bearing fruit in every good work and growing in the knowledge of God." So that is the end goal of today's message. If you know me at all, Matt's example of taking a bit of a detour as we get there, pretty much always through the Old Testament. So this is going to be a very sort of big picture, like Bible big picture sort of message, and we'll go through starting in Genesis, and spend most of our time in Exodus, but then sort of finish in the New Testament, all with the end goal of this living a life worthy of the calling. But I want to sort of re-emphasize a couple of points that go all the way through the Bible. So in Genesis, we won't actually open to Genesis. We'll spend most of our time in Exodus. But Abraham is called by God, right? And a couple of key points in this calling that I want to sort of keep emphasizing all the way through is that, God is our God and we are his people. So God decides to join Abraham in this covenant relationship. And we sort of have to think how unique that is, that God reached out to man to join a relationship with him. And he's the one who offers promises to us when he does that, right? He wants to be in a covenant with us, and he wants us to be his people. And we're sort of saved, we're picked by grace. So grace, the word, like people use that a lot if you're in church and you're not familiar with that as much. It's, if you remember your Veggie Tales, is undeserved favor, which is a very good definition, right? You don't deserve anything when you're saved by grace, right? Abraham wasn't called because of anything that he did. In fact, you don't even know that much about him before that. It was just an undeserved favor. God comes down, signs an agreement, and has promises when Abraham really has pretty much nothing to offer him. Right? And then he gives him the covenant sign, a circumcision, and tells him to move across the known world. Right? This leads us to points 3 and 4. That's 1 and 2. He's our God. We are his people. We're saved to grace, saved by grace, and called to live in response. The third point is faith. When God asks us, we should treat him as Lord and obey, right? It's not just, I know John 3:16 says this, but it's not just believing in God. It's believing God is who he says he is, right? So even the demons believe in God. It's believing he is who he says he is. People who look on God in the Bible or try to, can't really, right? He's the destroyer of nations, the ultimate judge. So when he says jump, we really should be saying how high, right? Abraham, we sort of think he drops everything and moves across the country, and you're like, wow, he moves. Understand, there's probably not even really roads then. He doesn't know where he's going. He has no idea. There aren't all these fancy maps and wherever, and he's planning his trip and all. In today's world, you're sort of like, well, I didn't get the right offers on my house, and I've got to set up my job interviews. He's sort of like, you're going someplace you have no idea it exists. Pack up these 50 or 100 people and all your things on mules and just start walking, bud. And you have to have faith that you're going somewhere, something, right? That's crazy. But he is in Hebrews 11 in the Hall of Fame. And it says, by faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed. And he set out for a place he was going to receive as an inheritance. A little bit later in that chapter, it says, by faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. Right? That is his faith. When God tells him something, he's like, fair enough. You're God. I got to go with that. Right? I got to believe that. And point 4, God's people are supposed to be set apart. You should look a bit different if you are obedient to God. So in Abraham's story, obviously circumcision is a pretty obvious one. But he was also a monotheist, right? He followed Yahweh. He had one God, which was rare at that time, right? And he was called to a different standard. It says in Genesis 18, actually. Abraham is to become a great and powerful nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him so that he will command his children and his house after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. This is how the Lord will fulfill to Abraham what he promised him. Again, that seems sort of obvious and great. For us now, we sort of expect righteousness and justice. That's sort of a normal thing. Back then, it wasn't, right? That wasn't a precursor to things, that you lived in a normal, right and just situation all the time. There wasn't the police. There wasn't this whole situation that we've been sort of used to in America as an amazing thing. So you think of like Hurricane Katrina, when it comes through and suddenly all of our systems and laws aren't in place. Suddenly it's not just righteousness and justice ruling everybody's actions, is it? So people devolve to the lowest common denominator pretty quickly. So that was an amazing thing that he was set apart that way. So those are the points that I want to bring through, but what I really want to look at is Exodus. Exodus chapter 20, if you want to follow along. So we've been reading Exodus, if you've been on the Bible reading plan, and the broader story is the Israelites' deliverance through the Red Sea or Reed Sea, which is chapter 13, 14. We're right there right now. Speaking of Bible reading plan, there is a Bible reading plan handout over there, if that is working for you, just as a reminder for this week's readings. So there's 3 readings, and you can jump on there and grab one of those on your way out. And basically, God redeems his people with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. And he reemphasizes that over and over. And it's really to show that Yahweh is the true God, right? It's over and above. That's actually a phrase from the Egyptian gods. That strong arm was a phrase that they used often. So this is like throwing it in their face like, no. Yahweh has the strong arm, right? He's the one that's going to redeem his people, right? And then first thing they do, they go into the wilderness to Sinai, and they're given instructions for holy living. And that's where we're coming up to in the readings, 19 to 24. So God's act of salvation comes before his call to covenant faithfulness. So let me repeat that. God's act of salvation, he pulls them out from slavery in Egypt, comes before his call to faithfulness to the government. Before he tells them, hey, by the way, you should be faithful to a covenant agreement with me, he saves them first, right? And it's not as if there isn't like a whole part of the Bible where it's talking about how the Israelites were all calling out to God and all this is going on. It wasn't something they did, really. God just says, I'm going to redeem you and you're going to be my people, right? And then afterwards he says, and by the way, this is what it means to be my people. After the fact, right? So what I want to talk about for today is their lifestyle should reflect that redeemed status. They were saved to be God's people. So he rescued them from slavery and said, hey, by the way, this is how you should look, and this is how you should behave, and this is what you should do, and how your structure should be. So the 10 Commandments is a great starting point for that. So he saves them from slavery, brings them through the sea into the wilderness. They go up Sinai to meet God, and here are his words to him in chapter 20. Verse 1 and 2 said, then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. Do not have other gods besides me. Right? So God telling them that story isn't just like a historical reminder. It just happened, right? They know the story. They know what's going on, right? What he is doing is giving them a framework for why he's giving them the 10 Commandments. This is a theological framework. I saved you, and therefore I'm going to give this to you. And you should be distinct from the other nations and follow these laws. Right? You should have no other gods before me, should flow directly from their loyalty to God because he just saved them. Right? That is pretty neat. And they should have an identity of being a redeemed people, because that's what he wants over and over. He says, I want to be your God. I want you to be my people. So when he asks us for things, we should treat him as Lord and obey. We should do that in gratitude. We should do that in love, because we believe he says who he is, who he says he is. And a little bit in fear. Not your sort of paralyzing cortisol fear, but in sort of a reverent fear, like, hey, whoa. Sorry about that. He is who he says he is. He's the creator of all things, and the wrath of God is a fearful thing. So for all of those reasons, we should want to do what he asks us. And that sets sort of the tone for all of the law. Obedience isn't about earning salvation, but responding to it. Right? Obedience isn't about earning salvation. It's about responding to it. So we are saved, and therefore there should be no other gods before him. And God has no problem being exclusive. So John 14:6, Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Right? He has no problem saying that. So if you ever hear anyone that goes on this sort of all roads lead to God or whatever, that's code words for I don't read the Bible. Right? Just doesn't work that way. God is not shy about saying it. So, verses 4 to 6 say, do not make an idol for yourself, whether in the shape of anything in the heavens above, or on the earth below, or in the waters under the earth. I think we did this last week, right? That's sort of the three-tier cosmology they were looking at. So heaven was up above, the rakia with the waters above that. Then there's the land here, and then there's chaos waters underneath, right? So basically all he's trying to say is in all of creation, anywhere, anything, do not make any sort of idols. Do not bow and worship to them, and do not serve them. For I, the Lord your God, which is Yahweh, I am a jealous God, punishing the children for the father's iniquity to the third and fourth generation for those who hate me, but showing faithful love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commands. So, interestingly, if you didn't know that, where it says God makes us in his image, that's the same word for idol, right? So an idol is basically like a place where you can sort of capture a little bit of that God's presence here, right? That's what an idol is, and you worship it, right? So when God created us, we have a little bit of his presence in us, right? We are his idol here. We don't need another one because we have his presence in us. So we're not trying to capture his presence in some idol, in something, right? And he certainly doesn't want us to have some other God, right? So he wants us to be our God. He wants to be our God and us his people. Verse 7, do not misuse the name of the Lord your God, because the Lord will not leave anyone unpunished who misuses his name. So this definitely includes cursing as a minimum. But I would argue it's not just about cursing. So everyone sort of takes the Lord's name in vain, and they're like, well, don't curse, that's not good. True, but it's a bit more sort of a comprehensive prohibition against any sort of misuse or irreverence of God's name, his titles, his attributes, his ordinances, or his works, right? So things like false oaths in God's name, about just blasphemy in general, saying things that aren't true. I would argue it includes hypocrisy. So telling people, this is what God expects of you, and then you doing something different, right? That brings dishonor to God's name. It sort of can be rephrased as a positive duty to say, you should be honoring God's name in all aspects of life. How you think, what you say, how you worship. and that by extension, we, communally, as a church, as a country, should uphold the sanctity of God's name. So that's not just an Old Testament thing. We just finished with hallowed be thy name, right? That was the third commandment basically expressed as a form of a command in the Lord's Prayer, right? What does hallowed mean? It means his name shouldn't be misused or used irreverently. Hallowed means it should be honored in all of our actions. Hallowed means, as a church and a country, we should uphold the sanctity of God's name. Right? That's what it means to hallowed be his name. And the last commandment we're going to do is verses 8 to 11. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You are to labor 6 days and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. You must not do any work, you, your son or daughter, your male or female servant, your livestock, or the resident alien who is within your city gates. For the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and everything in them in 6 days. Then he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and declared it holy. That might be the most obvious way that God's people are set apart. There was no culture at that time that had any sort of weekly calendar or weekly schedule. So that's sort of unique. But even more so, mandated rest for everyone, including slaves and animals. That was completely unheard of, right? And not just because it was different, but it's also, this is something we miss out on. The Bible says it a couple of times, but there's sort of the theme that if you don't work, you don't eat. That was real life for them. They were trying to get enough food for tomorrow. That was a daily adventure for these people, was just getting enough done so that they could eat tomorrow. And God is coming along and saying, every seventh day, just chill out, rest. Think about me for a while. And you're sort of like, that's not that easy. I got stuff to do, right? We say that now, and we know for sure we're going to have food on Monday. And we're still like, yeah, but I got stuff, things, right? You can imagine with these people, that pressure's even more. You're trying to feed your children and whatever else, right? And not only do you get the day off, give the day off to anyone working for you, slaves, servants, even animals. Just everybody chill. You're like, what? Right? So, but the Sabbath is a gift, and it's a command. And I'd love to do a message on that someday. But it's three things. It's an identifier, right? You're supposed to be set apart. And in that time, Sabbath was actually an identifier. You're giving an incredibly scarce resource, your time, to God. And that clearly sets you apart from others. So that is what they call the first table of the law. So 1 to 4 is how we are to interact with God. All right? That tells you how you should interact with God. The commandments 5 to 10 are how we're supposed to interact with other people. So you get into do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, false testimony, etc. Right? So this is echoed in the New Testament, where Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he answered, the most important is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. So that's the Shema that Steve mentioned last week. Remember, here. And he actually read that from Deuteronomy. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. And the second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There's no other commandment greater than these. Right? And that's sort of a summary of the 10 commandments. First 4 is love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and soul. If that's the case, you won't have other gods before him. Right? You'll bear his name in the way that it should be bared. You will keep his Sabbath holy and give your time to him. All of those things are loving the Lord your God. And then all the rest of them, love your neighbor as yourself. Don't commit murder. Don't commit adultery. Don't commit false witness. It's teaching you those things, right? So back to our key point here today. In the Exodus story, God's chosen people were saved by this mighty act of Yahweh, and their lifestyle should reflect that redeemed status. They didn't earn that redemption by doing anything particular in Egypt. He showed them undeserved favor, grace, rescued them from slavery, and then gave them instructions on how to live as God's chosen people. And he said, basically, you should behave as people who were redeemed from slavery. Now, if you haven't caught on to my plan yet, I'm arguing that this is not just an Old Testament thing, right? You didn't earn redemption. You didn't do anything particular in Dummer or Berlin or Gorham or wherever you're from to earn this redemption, right? You were saved to be God's people, his church. You were shown undeserved favor, grace, and he rescued you from slavery to sin. And then he instructed you, this is how you should live as God's chosen people. Your life should reflect that you've been redeemed by God from slavery. You should look a bit different if you are living a life worthy of the calling. So, emphasizing that he is our God and we are his people, we're saved by grace, and then we're called to live in response to that. We didn't do anything, but for whatever reason, God has decided to sign an agreement with us, a covenant, right? We should, it really aggravates me, testament is one of those old, I don't know, maybe a King James thing that's thrown in, but it should be called the New Covenant, the New Testament, right? That's what it is. It's a new agreement. It's a covenant that God is signing with us, right? So he's come into an agreement with you. He wants this relationship. He wants to be your God and for you to be his people. And we should then say, wow, you saved me. You're signing this covenant with me? That's amazing, right? Therefore, I'm going to live in a manner worthy of that, right? And we're saved by grace through faith. So when God asks, we should be treating him as Lord and obey. And the final point, which I'm going to spend a little bit more time on, is God's people are supposed to be set apart. So if you really believe God is who he says he is, then you should be doing your darndest. You don't hear that in many sermons, unless you're in Dummer. But you should be doing your darndest to follow what he expects of you, right? To do what he wants from you. Live a life worthy of the calling of Christ. You should have no other gods or idols before him. Not money, not food, not lust, not even family, not all of your own selfish desires, which all of us, I'll accuse you for you, and I'll accuse me for me. We all put our selfish desires before God all the time. I'm telling you now, he doesn't like that. Right? You signed an agreement with the creator of all things. So are you shaped by your dedication to him, or are you dedicating a grand total of 2 hours on Sunday? So, next week's reading in Luke, I'm going to jump to Luke 17. And it's kind of an interesting story. If I probably mentioned this, but I'm kind of if you're reading the Gospels, I'm kind of a Matthew man. I like Matthew. John's pretty good too. But I find Luke funny because there's some random stories that are just like really stick out to me that you're just sort of reading along and all of a sudden, so I think I mentioned a little while ago, but the story where Jesus is just walking down the street and there's a funeral going on and he's like, oh, that's crazy. Just stand up, kid. Okay, and it's just like a sidelight. It's not like a main part of the story. It's just like, yeah, one day Jesus was walking down the road, and he said, oh, raise that guy from the dead. Anyways, so, and this is another one of these stories that it's really kind of, it's out of context. It's very different from what you're used to, and particularly from what we're used to, I think, is more so in today's culture. Luke 17, 7 to 10. So this is Jesus speaking, and he says, which one of you, having a servant tending the sheep or plowing, will say to him when he comes in from the field, come at once and sit down to eat? Instead, will he not tell him, prepare something for me to eat? Get ready and serve me while I eat and drink, and later you can eat and drink. Does he thank that servant because he did what was commanded? In the same way, when you've done all that you were commanded, you should say, we are worthless servants. We've only done our duty. Right? Today's world, we reject hierarchy at all. Right? The fact that some people have a higher status than someone else, that's something we just reject. And I think sometimes that actually causes us to not appreciate greatness and goodness and people that are just, virtuous. So I think it was George Washington, I remember reading this a little while, he wrote a whole book about how his soldiers should be virtuous, how they are to behave virtuously as soldiers. And they worked hard to maintain that. Like, this is what we should do. You should all be virtuous great men. And therefore, people respected him, and they wanted him to be president or king or whatever because of that, right? I think sometimes we push back so much against hierarchy that we just, we don't even want people to be good people, and we don't want to sort of respect that. But even more so, we love the image of Jesus washed on our feet. That type of thing is great, right? Jesus the servant. Everyone should be the servant. That's just the way it should be, and it's all about servant leadership. But here's Jesus walking in and sort of saying, hey, by the way, I'm actually the master in this relationship. And I expect these things. When Paul is writing, he continuously says that. I am the bondservant of Christ, right? It is not my job to be up and in charge and awesome and on the equal or anything like that, right? Fighting with it. So, right, Paul is continuously bringing himself down and saying, that's my job, right? If I get knocked in the head, if I get thrown in prison, if I get whatever, that's my job. I am a slave, a bondservant to Christ, and that's my role, and that's where I should be. That's kind of hard for us to wrap our head around, that type of relationship. That's how we should be feeling about God. And that, clearly, based on this story, is what he expects from us, right? That's not a bad thing. He's God. He should expect that type of behavior from us, right? So, remember from the third commandment, or when we talked about hallowed be thy name, you have a positive duty to honor God's name in all of your aspects of your life. In the Old Testament, they had lots of these things, how they dressed and their dedication to even back then, to law and justice and all of that. There were lots of things that set them apart from the cultures of their day. They looked pretty different. Do you think that perhaps if you led a really, really godly life, the way you dress, the way you are dedicated to truth and love, all the things that you do in a daily routine might run in opposition to today's culture? Should it run in opposition to today's culture? It should, right? You should stick out. So is your commitment impacting who you hang around with? Is it impacting what you say to other people when you're out and about? Is it impacting how you dress? Not dressing like the culture of today. Not watching the same shows or doing the same things as everybody else in the culture today. Every day. So we had, must have been a number of years ago now, I don't remember how long ago, but when we lived in Littleton, I had a pastor. He was my last pastor before coming here, Pastor Mark, who was an awesome, awesome man of God. And he, when we had first moved home, baptized Heather while she was pregnant with Patrick. And then when we came here, he was retiring right when Patrick asked to be baptized. So we asked him to come over. So the first week after his retirement, he came here and he baptized Patrick and he preached a sermon. And then the following week, he was going to go on vacation because he had retired and go see his family in Florida. And he dropped dead at the airport from a heart attack. Yeah. But the last sermon that he preached was on running the race. And it's in 1 Corinthians 9. 1 Corinthians 9:24 says, "Don't you know that the runners in a stadium all race, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way as to win the prize." Right? Are you living your Christian life in such a way as to win the race? Are you giving it all, laying it all on the line, and doing your best to please Christ every day like a professional athlete would? Verse 25 says, "Now everyone who competes exercises self-control in everything, and they do it to receive a perishable crown, but we an imperishable crown." Right? So he's saying if you're a marathon runner, that's where it came back from, back in the day, marathon, right? 26 miles. You train hard. You have lots of self-control in all aspects of your life to make sure that you can train to run that race and win that race on that day, right? Are you disciplined and dedicated in your walk with Christ as if you are training for a marathon? That's ridiculous, by the way. We did that once, way back when I was younger. I was forced to ride on a bike as my wife trained for a marathon, and it nearly killed me. Forget her. So the amazing story about the marathon is I accidentally got stuck in a wrong place. I misjudged. It was in Dublin, and it zings all through the city. And I had to run about a mile to beat her to the finish line because she sort of came across this bridge, and I'm cheering for her. And then I'm looking at the map oh no, she's only got 2 or 3 miles left, and I got to be down there to see her when she crosses the finish line. So I ran the mile to get there. I was in so much worse shape at the end of the marathon than her. People thought I was running it. They're putting blankets around me and stuff "Sir, are you okay?" I'm okay. I'm all right. Heather was holding me up at the end of the marathon. So it was a very sad event. Sad. Amazing for her, sad for me. But that exercise, that sort of exemplifies that point. I was not training for a marathon. A mile will kill me, right? She was running 3 hours. That's what I mean. It nearly killed me riding the bike. 3 hours is what you got to train for this type of stuff, right? 26 miles takes forever to run. So that's what these people were doing. They're training their body to run 26 miles, hours and hours of running. That takes so much discipline to do that. 26.2, you're right. That last 0.2 is probably the worst, right? So Paul says in verse 26, "So I do not run like one who runs aimlessly, or box like one beating the air. Instead, I discipline my body and bring it under strict control, so that after preaching to others, I myself will not be disqualified." I'm actually going to end there with a prayer. Father God, let us run the race with endurance. Give us focus like Paul to live this life to the full glory of God in all our days. Help us to be set apart and worthy of the calling that you have given to us, so that on the last day, when we come face to face with Jesus, he will say, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've lived a life worthy of the calling of God." In Jesus' name, amen.